Hello and welcome. My name is Madeline Longoria Garcia, and these are our other stories. Today we have Sibu Szymanowska, who is joining us from somewhere in the world, and she is the co-founder of the Hybrid Tours and creator behind Go Global with Sibu. Sibu, thank you for joining us. And yeah, if you want to tell us where you're currently located, and this will probably also lead us into the whole conversation that we're really getting into today.
Hi, everybody. Well, first of all, thank you so much for having me. It's a pleasure to be here. My name is Sibu Szymanowska. I'm originally from Costa Rica, and we'll talk a little bit more about my background later. And I'm currently taking this call from the Netherlands. So I've been traveling full time for the past 5 years, and I bounce around countries every few weeks. So I'm here in the Netherlands at the moment.
Awesome. Yeah, I love that. And we got connected actually through Instagram via my dad, who met you several years ago in the Middle East, which is, a story on its own, I'm sure. And even the path of like being, traveling full time for the last several years, so many stories there, I know. And I am curious though, we got connected. I saw the content you were creating, and you had posted this video that is really just, it seemed like you posted it because of the times that we are experiencing right now and all of the rhetoric that is being thrown around, and sharing that your family is from different places and we are all from different places, and really talking about how migration has existed in so many different ways for so long, and we're quickly forgetting that though. But I don't know where you really want to start this story. If you want to start it with your own journey maybe, and then we can pull in the other threads of family and parents, and yeah, maybe that's the place to start here.
Sounds good. So basically, first of all, one of the reasons why I think I keep bouncing around, I guess that's a way to call it, is because I have yet to find a place to call home. I've lived in, I think, about 8 countries, 13, 14 different cities. And by living, I mean actually living, not spending a month or two, which is what most people consider living nowadays. I mean spending more than at least 6 months. And in most of these, I've spent multiple years in these countries. And while I've felt at ease, I don't think I've ever really felt at home. I didn't feel at home growing up in Costa Rica. I didn't feel at home in the US. It's just something that you could call it a struggle depending on what perspective you see it from, or you could just call it, living in modern times and embracing the world. And I've basically shifted my life so that everything is done remotely. So I am able to make an income and do work on the projects that I work on and do everything that I do remotely. So I just lead life in a, a little bit more of an unconventional way, but I'm still, doing the same things everybody's doing. I just move around a lot. But I think maybe for some people that might be considered as running away from something. I don't necessarily see it as that. For me, I just see it as, I don't know, curiosity for the world, which is something I've always had since I was a young child. Curiosity for the world, wanting to discover a little bit more of it. And then, of course, because of my background, so my father was a refugee, my mother is the daughter of immigrants. I myself am a migrant, and I feel like this is something I grew up having family members all around the world, and this was completely normal to me. And missing people, as strange as that might sound, has always been a part of life. I might have been home in Costa Rica, but that didn't mean that I wasn't missing other people, other family members.
Right.
And then as I grew older, I started, making friends and from different places around the world. So I think missing people is going to happen no matter where I am. And so I think it's because of that, it's difficult to just say, okay, I'm going to pick one place and just settle there, because even if I did that yearning for others will always be there no matter what.
Yes, I've had people. So I spent several years in my 20s doing a lot of traveling as well, and I had people being like, "What are you running away from?" And I'm like, "Not running away from anything. I'm very curious about all of these places, and I have the opportunity to do this, so why not?" So it's very interesting the way that people view this. And I think that is another interesting piece that you share of like, well, no matter where I am, I'm always going to be like missing someone, right? And that was a familiar feeling to you growing up. And so it's not really a difference of where you are. It's just no matter what, you can find people, and also you're going to have people far away who you are going to miss.
Correct.
Yeah. And so you grew up in Costa Rica, and were you, I mean, you just mentioned you didn't really feel like you were at home in Costa Rica, even though that's where you grew up. And can you share a little bit about that and your years there?
Yeah, so for the most part, I've lived, I think, about a third of my life in Costa Rica, on and off, basically moving
Okay.
back and forth, and I officially left when I was 17. But yeah, being so I was born in Costa Rica. We moved to the US when I was 6 months old, and then we went back to Costa Rica a few years after that. And I remember being probably 5 or 6 years old and already feeling like I didn't belong.
Mm.
And
What?
I know how crazy that sounds, but I clearly remember being that young and thinking, I cannot wait to leave. And I know,
Yeah.
and I had a pretty, I mean, back then things were, my parents are divorced. Well, they were together. Like I had a very loving family, but I didn't, I felt like I didn't fit in. Like I didn't feel like part of a community. I was happy at home, but not necessarily in school, in the environment that I was in, and I basically couldn't wait to leave. And so I swore to myself that by the time I was old enough, I would leave. And I did. The moment I graduated high school, I think within a week or two, I just basically left the country. Have I
Mm-hmm.
been back multiple times to visit? Of course I have, to visit
Mm-hmm.
my family, but I told myself that I didn't really want to live there again. And Costa Rica is a stunning, stunning country, don't get me wrong. And I've made my peace with Costa Rica. It's just not a place that I feel comfortable living in.
Yeah. Can I ask, are you comfortable sharing with what, or do you have memories about like why you felt that that wasn't your community and that you just felt, yeah, that it wasn't a part of you?
Yeah, of course. So, I mean, from what I remember, basically, I think it was the idea of that everybody had to fit within a box, and I just didn't
Mm,
fit into that box. And it was just so awkward for me trying to fit, whether it was my name, my last name, the fact that I like reading and I didn't spend that much time watching TV. And I know this might come off as a little strange, but yeah, it was just the things that I was passionate about. You know, like for me, staying home and going over encyclopedias and memorizing random capitals from around the world was way more entertaining than going out and getting dirty, I guess, than going out and
hmm,
playing. That was just me, and that was fine, you know. But I didn't. And also, it is, so Costa Rica. Now I've met way more. I don't, by liberal, I don't mean politically liberal. I just mean that liberal in the sense that, you know, they're open to people from all around the
sure.
world. I don't like how the term is sometimes
Yeah.
misused because of US politics. But now that I'm older, like every time I go to Costa Rica, I'm surrounded by people like myself. It's a different story, and I have very, very close friends there. But growing up, that was not the case. We also got heavily, heavily bullied because of our
Mm,
lack of religious background. So Costa Rica is a very, very
yes.
heavily Catholic country, and my parents were not, and they made a conscious decision to raise us without a religion, and that
Mm-hmm.
just did not fit in well with Costa Rican society. And so from a young age, I just didn't feel right, and I didn't feel at home. And I think all I needed was like a so we had, in my school, we had people like kids like from various backgrounds and everything, but um from a multitude of religious backgrounds, not really. And so
Mm-hmm.
that was something that I really struggled with. And those experiences later on is what led me to do activist, like interfaith activism. So I think of myself as atheist, maybe a bit spiritual, but even despite the fact that I do consider myself atheist, I still will advocate for religious freedom, because I think that it's something that everybody should have, and nobody should
Yeah.
be out there going after you because of what you believe in or what you do not believe in my case.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, you briefly mentioned, your name was different, and your name is this combination of different, I assume, different cultures and different ethnicities. Can you maybe tell us a little bit about your name?
So Costa Rica, unfortunately, is a country that was very whitewashed. So
Yeah.
we didn't really. So when you think about Guatemala, you think about Mexico, you think about Peru, you think about the Aztecs, the Mayans, etc. We didn't really have like that big, a big indigenous group.
Hmm.
It was just mostly like small indigenous tribes scattered around the country, and that basically meant that it was easier to wipe those out. So
Hmm.
Costa Rica, when you go there, most of the culture's gone basically. So most of the culture's gone. Most of the cities you'll come across, they all have Spanish names, and that has also somehow. Sorry, I'm trying to think of the right word here.
Yeah.
Um,
Take
that
your time.
has somehow also unconsciously been incorporated into the way that we live. By this, I mean that even the way that we name our kids in Costa Rica, they're all biblical names, they're all Spanish names. And so my mom and my dad, they wanted to pick something unique.
Hmm.
So they spend some time it's a really cute story. They spent some time at the National Library in Costa Rica looking for something unique, and they came across Sibu. And Sibu, it's spelled Sibo the way that they found it, and all the Sib. Anyway, but it was pronounced Sibu. And Sibu was the god of an indigenous tribe in Costa Rica, which still exists. But the book that they found was basically the book was 100 years old. It had been published 100 years before I was born, and so they like literally 1888, 1988, and they saw that as a sign. And Sibu was basically the god of all the good and beautiful, and it's an indigenous name. And so
Mm.
my dad never learned Spanish, unfortunately, but so he was like, okay, unique name, whatever. But for my mom, it was like, okay, let's, honor our Costa Rican indigenous heritage. And that's basically why my name was given. So, I mean, there are plenty of, you know, Marias and all these different versions of
Sure.
Marias and whatnot. And like, again, very Spanish,
Yeah.
very, many biblical names. And so Sibu I've never met anybody with my name, for example. Like,
Yeah.
it's just something that's very unique. And obviously, as a child, that meant, you know, bullying and not fitting in because I didn't have the same type of name that everybody else did. And that's just one little example.
Sure. Sure. Yeah. I mean, we were briefly talking about the importance of names and pronunciation and being conscientious of that. And it is something that, as children and as adults, people even like weaponize names in these really unfortunate ways. And like you said, feeling singled out because you didn't have a name that fit in with whatever the theme was. And whatever maybe was easier for people to pronounce and all of that. So yeah, that's something. I think names are very important, and I think it's something that we need to be intentional about because they carry, it's your identity, it's a part of your identity. And especially like with your parents being very intentional about, okay, let's seek out names, let's have some sort of like honoring with how we name our child. And so yeah, thank you for sharing that. And I you say that you're a daughter of immigrants. Your father was a refugee. Can you tell us the stories of how your parents got to Costa Rica, and how they met, and all of the things? Like I said, I think that your story is very dynamic, and um, it's a great example from the little I know so far of just, yeah, how humans move about the world.
Thank you. Yes, thank you. So basically, my father was a refugee, correct? So he is Polish,
Mhm.
and he was in Poland until his mid-20s. And Poland was, we're talking about the 70s here, and Poland was not part of the Soviet Union, but Poland was a communist country, and so a lot of people don't realize that there were refugees from the communist bloc. And so I think, for example, if you think about North Korea, if you were to encounter a citizen from North Korea, like let's say
Hmm.
you encounter someone from North Korea and they just fled, would you give them asylum or not? The answer will probably be yes. Well, if you're listening to this, I want you to apply the same thinking to my father, for example. So my father,
Hmm.
he fled from Poland to Austria, and he was in Austria for about a year. And so the stories he tells is basically he fled during summer, which was very lucky for him because it was warm, but he had
Hmm.
nowhere to go. So he would tell us about. I think Vienna's the only city in the world that actually has vineyards within the city limits as a
Mm.
capital, and so he was basically living illegally in vineyards, and he just basically survived of grapes and water from streams that he could drink while he was there.
Wow.
And this was during summer, which made it fairly easy for him to do so. Later on, he told us that he couldn't eat grapes for years
Hmm.
afterwards
Yeah.
because of that. And so that was that. And after a few months, he also eventually managed to get a job black market, and he was handing out pamphlets on the street to try to make a living. So whenever I see someone handing out a pamphlet, the sooner they get rid of the pamphlets, the better off they are,
Hmm.
even if they don't use them. So whenever I see someone handing out pamphlets, I'll always take a pamphlet because whenever I
Hmm.
see someone, it always reminds me of my father. But funnily enough, so my father actually did have he had a master's degree in electrical engineering, and that's basically what got him out of the country. So many countries, the US, Canada, Australia, for example, they were trying to take people out of the communist bloc. And he found out that they were basically giving interviews per se. And so the first
Hmm.
place where he was able to score an interview was the US Embassy. And they interviewed him, and he spoke Polish, Russian, German, but didn't speak a word of English. And they were like, you know what? You're an electrical engineer, got a couple languages. I'm sure we'll have some use for you. And so he was granted
Yeah.
asylum and moved to the U.S. Well, as he was granted asylum and was able to go to the U.S. in the late 70s.
So at that time, Austria was not accepting refugees and giving asylum status.
Ah, well, I
Do
mean,
yeah, do you know?
we're talking about millions and millions of people here. You know
Sure.
what the systems are like. I think once they, maybe at the beginning, they feel a little bit, more lenient or compassionate, but after a while, they're like, you know what, we can't really
Yeah.
deal with this
Yeah.
anymore. And this had been going on for quite some time already, so it's not
Yeah.
like it was a recent.
Right.
I mean, Poland had been communist for years by then, for a long time. So, yeah.
And then, okay, so your dad comes to the United States. Do you know where he lands and what, I mean, yeah, what he
New
ends up
York.
doing? New York.
New
Okay.
York. Apparently, Staten Island had closed not long before he arrived, so he wasn't processed through Staten
Hmm.
Island, but he arrived in the US, and the first job he got was as a dishwasher. And within 2 years, he had learned enough English to manage to get himself an office job. And so he
Okay.
just started working the ranks from there. And this is something that I think I mentioned in the video that no, sorry, cat
It's
here.
okay. Mhm.
I think I mentioned in the video that I had shared. The reason I shared that video is because it was World Refugee Day. And it's
Mhm.
just, I don't, like, if I have to talk about my father and our story, I will. But I think it's just the one day in the year when we can actually, commemorate refugees and speak about them openly and raise awareness about what's happening. And as of right now, there are over 120 million refugees around the world, and this is something that
Yeah.
most people don't know about. And what I did say in that video was that, like, I do not, yeah, sure, was my dad smart? Sure, but I don't think he was exceptional in any way. And so this is what people normally assume, that you have to be, a model citizen in order to be given to be accepted into a country, or that only those
Mhm.
citizens are only those deserve to be given a chance. And so my father was able to make a life for himself in the US because he was given a chance. Had he not been given
Yeah.
a chance, who knows what would have, I mean, he would have just been stuck in Poland, right, with everybody else, and he would have, um, stayed there and done things differently. That's it. I mean, communism did end in the late 80s anyway, but
Hmm.
that's what happened. And so within a few years, he was able to get an office job and then just eventually started his own company and everything. And that's basically because he was given status, because he was given the right to work. And so we think of refugees as, well, but people as a whole, they think of refugees as lazy and as not wanting to get
Hmm.
jobs and taking advantage of the systems. But the reality is that many of them don't even have the right tools to be able
Right.
to incorporate themselves into society and be able to give back. And many of them then are forced to work illegally. And in places like the US, so this is something that so many people forget.
Yeah.
People in the US, whether they have legal status or not, they pay taxes either way.
Yeah.
They
Yeah.
do. And this is something that people always forget.
Yeah, that's a huge like information issue. And it drives me crazy too that people
Yeah.
think that, oh, they're just, leeching off this system and all of this stuff. And it's like, no, actually, they pay into the system and they do not even see the benefits. They don't have access to the benefits at all. And, what you're even describing is your dad was this electrical engineer with a master's degree. And I have heard that type of story many times of coming to the United States as a refugee with asylum status, but you can't get a job in that
Mm-hmm.
field. And suddenly you're working a job that is probably in your home country, something you never thought that you were going to have
Mm-hmm.
to do. Or, yeah, I mean, just like what a lost opportunity for high skilled
100%.
people,
And
and this is,
we
yeah,
need high
and we
skilled
need,
people.
yes. And it's something that, again, I think it's it's the rhetoric that's built around this, that, they're unskilled people who are trying to come here. And it's like, no, that's not true at all. There are people of all walks of life who are trying to seek out better opportunities in other places, who are, and it shouldn't really even matter, but even people who are highly skilled and highly educated. And the reasons why we see, folks working as dishwashers or in other jobs that that born citizens do not usually want, is because they don't have access to the opportunities to work in the field that they've worked toward for
100%.
however many years before, whether it's a language barrier or simply just, yeah, like, people turning away from them because, oh, you're from somewhere else, you have an accent, you look
Mm-hmm.
different, like,
Correct.
yeah. I'm curious how your parents met, because your mom was in Costa Rica and your dad has gone to the United States. Or is there a piece here that I'm not?
No, it's
Yeah.
nothing remarkable about this part of the story. No, my mom, she just went to California to study English, and that's where they met.
Okay. Okay. Um, but and then on your mom's side, there is this whole other story too of going to Costa Rica, and was she born in Costa Rica or did she also migrate there?
No, my mom was born in Costa Rica. My
Okay.
grandmother was also born in Costa Rica, but my great grandparents from my mother's side were actually Italian and Spanish, and and so this is what people, and we talked a little bit about this before. I think there's so much hypocrisy behind, this rhetoric of, refugees and migrants and people taking up resources and going wherever they want and not staying home. When, for example, Latin America is a very, very clear example of this. And I'm not just
Mm-hmm.
talking about the amount of refugees that Latin America took in, European refugees, and not just Latin America. Look up like actual Polish, like in, where was it? Zambia, Zimbabwe? I mean, those countries didn't exist then, but like in so many different places,
Mm-hmm.
people took refuge all over the world. I mean, there was a massive war in Europe for
Yeah.
multiple years, and people had to flee, and they went wherever they could go, and they didn't just go to North America. Many of them ended up in Latin America, and this is something that people
Mm-hmm.
forget. And nobody like nobody complained against them. Nobody tried to
Mhm.
kick them out. They were just welcomed with open arms, given status, and that's it. And they just incorporated into society. Many of them, maybe they, met, might have married other people of their community, but many of them did not. Many of them actually ended up marrying and having children with locals. And so this,
Mhm.
dispersed and became part of society. And you can see this all over, and I mean all over Latin America. So
Mhm.
I'm not just talking about World War One, World War Two, or dictatorships, but this is the most important part. And so my mother's side of the story is a little bit different because these were Italians and Spanish that arrived in Costa Rica for economic opportunities about 100 years ago. And when you think economic opportunities, some people might say, "But what do you mean economic opportunities?" I mean, countries like Venezuela, for example, were booming. Costa Rica, they weren't really
Mhm.
sure what was happening. Um, if for those of you who are not Spanish speakers, Costa Rica literally means rich coast. That's what it
Mhm.
means because they thought many years ago that Costa Rica was flooded with gold. Spoiler,
Yeah.
it was not, but that's one of the reasons why people ended up there. So by the time my great grandparents and their families arrived in Costa Rica, like that whole idea of um gold was, thrown out the window, but they still arrived for economic opportunities, just like you'll see plenty of people arriving into Europe nowadays for economic opportunities. And let me tell you, my family was not in any way turned away. They weren't. They
Yeah.
went and they settled, and it's been 100 years.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a huge piece that we're so quick to forget, right? And you said it's not just about the wars, but in general, just to be able to pursue economic opportunity. But in this whole process of creating our other stories, I also have an episode coming out with a person whose grandparents migrated to the United States seeking better opportunities because of the post World War II era in Europe. And this has happened so many times in the US, in Mexico, in Costa Rica, in Venezuela, like in all of these countries. There's
Correct.
a reason why you find these sizable populations of folks who have European ancestry all throughout the Americas. And it's because of these waves of asylum seekers who are looking for better opportunities, a better life, who are leaving war torn nations in Europe. And there is nothing left for them there to improve their lives. And yeah, we as a population have forgotten that. And it's the same thing happening over and over again with different populations, different parts of the world. And yet the rhetoric is so different at this point in time.
It is, and the amount of racism, it's just very interesting. The whole, I absolutely despise the term expat. I really do. Like this idea of,
Mm-hmm.
you're a migrant, you're an expat simply because of the color of your skin is just ludicrous to me. But something that I do want to highlight, and something that people again tend to forget, is that let's have a look at Australia, for example. The amount, and
Mm-hmm.
I mean the amount of
Mm-hmm.
North American and European citizens that overstay their visas and work illegally because they don't want to go back home in Australia is
Mm-hmm.
insane. And now, because of digital nomadism and all these different things happening, this is increasingly happening in Thailand, Indonesia, Costa Rica, Mexico.
Mm-hmm.
It's
Mm-hmm.
happening. It's happening. People are overstaying their visas. They're living illegally in these
Mm-hmm.
countries. And
Mm-hmm.
but no, they're regarded differently. Why? Because they have a strong passport. And why? Because they're white. I'm sorry, but
Mm-hmm.
this is it's just ridiculous, to be honest. I
Oh
do
yeah.
believe the term expat exists, but in my head, for me, the proper term for expat is, because there are expats. There really are. If there
Mm-hmm.
are people who do not migrate permanently, we do need a term for that. But for me, an expat is someone who was sent to a destination, to another country, simply because their job contract stated that that job needed to be performed in that country. And however long that
Mm.
contract is for, that's however long they'll be staying in the country. Once that contract is over, they'll be going back. That is an expat. Anything else besides that is a migrant. I don't care if you
Yeah.
have citizenship there or not, and it's not just Europe and the US, especially in the Middle East, for example, where there's so much racism going on, unfortunately. If you're South Asian, you're a migrant, but if you're from Europe, you're an expat. I'm sorry, but you're all staying there indefinitely. Yes, none of you will ever get citizenship because that's the way these countries, the Gulf countries, were built, but that doesn't make you any less of a migrant.
Right. That's very interesting too. I mean, this piece about the Middle East, and like, to put it out there, yes, the nations, I don't know if it's all of them, but I know that many nations in the Middle East, you cannot get citizenship there unless you are ethnically part of those
Correct. And people
countries.
assume that it's North American or European citizenships that are the hardest ones in the world to get. No, we're talking Gulf countries. Those are the most. We're talking you could be spending 20, 30 years in a country and never get citizenship there. You're just there as a migrant with a work visa. That's it.
Yeah, and you have to renew these work visas every certain number of years. I think it depends on what status your work visa is.
Correct. And if you're a higher earning individual, then you might get a golden visa or diamond, gold. Like, they all have different terms, and obviously this is a high ranking visa where you might be given status for 5-10 years. So you only have to renew it every 5-10 years.
Right. And I don't want to get too far down that rabbit hole, but I spent time in Dubai for the first time, my first time in the Middle East. I was there just for an event, but I was speaking with folks who live there who are there on work visas, extended work visas. They have, I think they both had like the 10-year long one, which was like a really big deal for them to be able to have.
Yes.
Okay, we got the 10-year long one. That's a good one to get. And in the conversations I was having with them about the whole process and their lives there, it kind of it triggered this thought in me of like, man, imagine if that's the way the United States was established. All of these non-native people in the United States having to continuously reapply for status, and only the indigenous populations being the ones who have citizenship outright, no matter what. Just, it sent me on this whole other thought, deep dive thought of what would our world look like? What would specifically the United States and really all of the Americas look like if that's the way that these places were established, and if that was anyway, deep dive thought. I don't know, if you have ever even thought about that.
It's an interesting thought. I've never really thought about it, because think about it. I mean, most of the Americas are citizenship by birth. So you could be living in a place, and then if you have children, then your children automatically get that citizenship. But in most countries in the Americas, if you're not ethnically from there, for most people, of course, there are people that, and obviously there's a certain amount of privilege because there are people who are tied down in the system and might never ever get citizenship, unfortunately. But for those that do, it's a process that takes several years. Just the other day, I was listening to a podcast about a woman, and she was talking about how back in the 70s, it took her about 20 years of living in the US to be able to get citizenship, and she was Filipino. So, I mean, obviously the processes are much, much shorter now, and they're depending on, which, let's call it regime, which regime is at hand in the US. But yeah, some years it's easier, some not as much, but it's nowhere near as difficult as it used to be. One and two, it is possible for most people. There is a path to citizenship, but not in many cases. And like we were talking about just now, Gulf countries, forget it. It's just, it's never happening.
Yeah, interesting. And I mean, like you said, it really depends on who's in power, especially in the United States. And what I'm learning is right now that path to citizenship is getting harder and harder.
100%.
And yeah, I wonder if we don't need to get down that hole too much right now. That's a whole other topic on its own. But I wonder, with coming back to your family and your story, and Your parents met in California. But they end up moving back to Costa Rica, and like there's this like movement also with your family of back and forth US,
Correct.
Costa Rica. And can you talk a little bit about what that timeline was?
So yeah, we were mostly based out of Costa Rica, and my father just traveled a lot because of
Hmm.
work. So they set up a store in Costa Rica, and so it was pretty revolutionary for its times. We're talking about the 90s here. So my dad would travel to Asia basically to get the latest computer software gear, computer games.
Okay.
I grew up playing the best computer games the market had to offer, educational ones, because my parents wouldn't let me play anything else. But they were fun. Oh my god, I enjoyed those times so much. But yeah, so that's basically, so my father was just basically going back and forth. So yeah, even when they were settled, movement was just very much ingrained as part of our family, because it was, not just we're not talking about basic survival here. We're just talking about, thriving economically, and this was just an opportunity that they saw and decided to take advantage of it.
Yeah. Yeah. So you're born in Costa Rica. You spent a few years, like you said, in the United States. Do you know why your family decided to do that?
The US?
Yeah, instead of staying in Costa Rica for the whole time, because I know you said that there was this period of time of when you were, I mean, a baby and a young child that you were in the US.
We did, but
Um,
my dad, again, traveling a lot, and my mom felt pretty lonely.
mm,
And so she felt better at home in Costa Rica with, being close to her family. So we
of
just
course.
ended up going
Yeah.
back. And I think within a year or two of us moving back, that's when my little sister was born. And so, yeah, we just stayed there. And my parents got divorced in the year 2000. So around the time I was 12. And then my
Okay.
dad left Costa Rica, and then he never went back.
Okay. And then you decided to go somewhere else once you graduated from high school. And I am curious if you could share a little bit about what led you to that decision and the thought process, and then even what that was like for you, because now you're, yeah, I mean, migrating to a whole other country and culture.
Correct. Yes. So I was 17, and I did not, unfortunately, get there is free education in Costa Rica, and they have some of the best universities in Latin America. However,
Mhm.
there's a admission test you have to take, and did I pass it? Yes, but not with flying marks. Let's put it this way. So I would have
Mm,
basically struggled for a year or two. I could have gotten in, but then it's, like a struggle to try to make it up. It's kind of like, getting into community college and trying to make it into a
okay.
state university kind of thing. And so that's what happened. University in the States, going to college, is outrageously expensive.
Hmm.
And Europe could have been free, but we didn't have the resources that we have now. I also didn't know everything that I know now. Had I known I could have studied in Europe for free, I probably would have ended up in Europe, but I didn't.
Okay.
And so I ended up going to China for my bachelor's degree. And I was there. So it was a 4-year, I did the whole thing there. So it's not like it was
Wow.
just a, 1-year
Yeah.
study abroad program. No, like I did the whole 4 years of college there. I studied
Why
economics.
China?
Really affordable. Really affordable. And
Okay.
my dad was already thinking about settling in China. We never did live together.
Okay.
I,
Okay.
I, I lived in China like alone from the start, but he had already met his current wife while he
Okay.
was there, who's Chinese. And yeah, and education was so affordable, and also recognized everywhere around the world.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so going to college in China just made sense back then. So I ended up going to college. I don't have any student debt because of that. And I ended up staying 7 years there. But because I was there were all these like incredible business opportunities that I would have never been able to take advantage anywhere else in the world. So I basically started my own company at the age of 19 with no funding, seed funding, grants, loans,
Wow.
nothing. And this is, I like, back then I don't think I understood how big of a deal this was, but like starting a company with no money simply because you recognize that there's a demand
Yeah.
that you need to cater to, that was huge. And I don't think I would have been able to do this anywhere else. Like me, a Costa Rican woman, starting a company in China at the age of 19 with no money. Like, no, forget it. But it was possible, and it was in China. So
Wow. What was that business?
exports. I mean, everything's made in
Okay.
China. So
Yeah.
the province I was in, which is called Guangdong, if you pick up an item, chances are it might say it was made in Guangdong. So Guangdong is basically, they call it the factory of the world.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of the products that we consume from China are from Guangdong. So it just made sense to start. I started working as an interpreter, English, Spanish, Chinese. I These were other times, basically no phones, no Google Translate.
Sure.
I was
Sure.
forced to learn to speak Chinese extremely quickly. So within three
Yeah.
months, I was already communicating, and I had amazing
Wow.
teachers who forced me to learn how to read and write. So that was huge. That was huge, and I would have never done it without their help.
Yeah, I mean, okay. So you all of your classes were in
No,
Chinese then? No,
no,
no, they weren't. Okay.
they were in English, but
Okay.
obviously Chinese was definitely handy. I would probably just say like 10-15% of my classes um were in Chinese, but Chinese education is not very good, to be honest. I
Okay.
think it's not for, there's some degrees that it's really good for and some that it's not. I would say that anything that has to do with like sciences or maths
Mm-hmm.
is great, but
Mm-hmm.
anything that has to do with more critical thinking,
Sure.
reasoning, etc. So political sciences,
Yep. And there's a
economics
reason
was,
for
yeah,
that.
exactly. Yeah, we're not going to delve into that. But yeah,
Yeah.
economics was not, I mean, it was okay, but I think for me it was just basically, I wasn't particularly happy with the classes, but for me it was like, okay, get the degree, get this out of the way, and work on your company, which is basically what I was doing most of the time.
Okay, so at the age of 17, you go to China, you start your degree there. By the age of 19, you've created your own export company and are doing this whole thing. And then you graduate, you have a 4-year degree, and you stay there for a few years more. What made you go somewhere else? And where did you go after that?
Looking back, I honestly think it was the racism. I just couldn't deal with it anymore. I was very, very fed up. I mean, if you're, it depends. It really depends. I know that in some situations I'm white passing and I'm completely aware of the privilege. I really am, but in others I'm not. And so in China, for example, there were many times in which people thought they weren't sure about my ethnic background, and then they'd hear me speak Chinese, and I would speak Chinese fluently, but I had a bit of an accent. They were like, okay, she must be Uyghur. So Uyghurs are
Hmm.
Chinese that are from the western part of China, and they're Muslim.
Mm-hmm.
Ethnically, they're Turkic people, and they just happen to be part of China. Most people thought I was from Xinjiang, specifically from that they thought I was Uyghur. And so the amount, I mean, in China, there's a lot of staring, pointing, people taking pictures of you, and after a while, you just become completely desensitized to us because you can be paying attention to
Yeah.
to everybody around you. It's every single day. It's just too much. However, you still, especially if you speak the language, you do understand, and I did. And so for me, first thing in the morning, I wake up, I get in the elevator. I had a little dog, and so I take out my little dog for a walk. It's 6 in the morning, and I get in the elevator, and I'm there in my pajamas, and I'm barely awake. And I get in the elevator, and I already have people talking shit about me in my face.
Yeah.
And it's just 6 in the morning, and I'm barely awake, and all I need to do is take out the dog, and I'm just like, I can't deal with this anymore. So
Yeah.
after 6 years, I was like, this is too much. By year 6, I told myself I'm gonna leave and I'm gonna move to Europe. And I saved up money for it. I saved up for a year, and then year 7, I left. So I was there for 7 years.
Yeah, that's something I've heard that about China. I've never been there, but I've heard that about China. And I mean, it's not unique to China. There are many nations around the world where because there is so much like ethnic homogeneity that when you
Correct.
look
Correct. Yes.
different, you stick out a lot. And those whispers, and especially for people if you don't speak the language, it's easier to ignore. You still feel it. Like there is this
Yes.
feeling that you get.
Yes. You do. You feel it.
Yeah.
But
But mo
understanding,
exactly.
it's a whole different story. And so, I mean, I was thriving. People could not understand why I was leaving. I had a great apartment. I had a little dog. I had, the boyfriend, the salary. I was traveling all the time. Had a lot of money saved up. Like I had an amazing group of friends. Had a great community. I've been there so long, and I spoke the language so well that I was basically taken as a like I had a certain level of even I was what 24. I had a certain level of status, and people looked up to me and respected
Mhm.
me, especially like among the foreign community, because they were like, okay, Sibu's the go-to if you need anything. Sibu, she's experienced, she's this, she's that. It was amazing. Like I was doing so extremely well, but there was something in the back of my head, and I was like, I can't, I'm not, like, I am happy, but at the same time I'm not, and there's something missing, and I just want to leave. And so I did. But then I've come to realize that that feeling of something missing has been very prevalent throughout my life. So I don't think it was just a Chinese thing. But like I said, China in a way was a love-hate relationship, and I'm extremely grateful for the connections I've made, the friendships. The experience was absolutely incredible. And nobody, I mean, I'm sorry, but that's gonna always makes for a great story whenever I'm applying for jobs. I like, okay, bachelor's degree China. Like it's all
Yeah,
it's intriguing. It definitely
for
is, but it
sure.
was just a part of my life, and that's it. And I left.
Yeah, I mean, I'll say, when I saw that you posted that video about just a brief overview of your life and you went to China to become a university student, and I was like, what the hell? Who is this person? Like, what? This is not, yeah, it's a certain type of person who decides to do that and also then just stay there and build a life there, right? You didn't just go there, like you said. It wasn't just a study abroad year or just, okay, I'm just going there to get my degree and leave, but
Correct.
you built a life there.
Yes.
Yeah. And, kind of this common thread of feeling different too and needing and it seems like this is something that has driven you to seek out other places, at least during these 20 the first 24 years of your life, of feeling different in Costa Rica, so wanting to go somewhere else. And I wonder too if you have memories of feeling that way even in the United States in the short period of time that you spent there as a kid or traveling back and forth, if that was
Um,
also a thread there or a
I mean,
theme
I
there.
was happy with my friends and I was happy with my family, but I
Of
don't
course.
think that was that. I guess that didn't feel like enough. I think
Yeah.
wherever I've been in the different places that I've lived in, I think that I felt the most at home. I mean, home is a feeling, right? It's not a place. And
Mhm.
I feel like the times where I've felt most comfortable are the times where I've built some sort of community. And I'm not talking about individual single friends, a community. And that is so,
Yeah.
so, so extremely difficult to build. And the few times that I've had it, it's just vanished within 6 months to a year because everybody just left, basically. And I think the
Mhm.
longest standing community I had was the one in China, many of which I'm still very much in touch with, and they're still some of my closest friends. However, okay, I had the community, and like I said, I had it all. Like if I ticked off all the boxes, 24, and I already have all these amazing things, and yeah, it still wasn't good enough, and so it's hard because obviously no place is perfect, right?
Mhm.
But then will any place ever be good enough? I think that's the eternal struggle that I don't know if I'll always have, but it seems like I might.
Yeah. Yeah. I think, yeah, this is something actually, and this is a theme that I'm thinking about exploring in a future season, is, yeah, this home. What is home, right? And realizing that it is a feeling. It is something that we have within ourselves, but we have to feel that around ourselves as well. And yeah, I mean, the way that you're like, okay, yes, Costa Rica is quote unquote home because that's where you grew up. That's where you spent the majority of your formative years. But there's more to it than that. And I've thought about this a lot with myself too. I grew up in Los Angeles, born and raised in Los Angeles, and that is quote unquote home, but it's not really home. You know, my family's there, I love them, they're great, you know, but like, yeah, similar. It's kind of like, well, but that's not where I have the community and the people and this feeling. And it's hard to explain that, what that feels like.
It is. It really, really is. I don't expect most people to understand, and that's completely fine. However, things are changing, and so like we talked about running, like people telling you that you're running away from something. Maybe I am,
Mhm.
maybe I'm not, but I mean the way the world is built nowadays, like so for example, and I'm not trying to, you know, say that I'm not irresponsible. You can judge me any way that you might want to judge me, listeners, but um you know, like I know people who have, you know, stable incomes and they're in one place and they spend all their money every single month, live paycheck to paycheck. They're not doing particularly well, but then like from an outsider's perspective, they're stable. You know, maybe I'm not
Mhm.
stable when it comes to location, but you know, I work remotely, I save, I invest. You know, like there are still ways to do it. I mean, things are changing after all, and we don't. And something I do say a lot. I mean, we used to be nomadic, what, right? Like
Mhm.
human beings used to be nomadic
Mhm.
ages ago, and like what if, I don't know, and I've thought about this, like what if I'm always meant to be nomadic, or what if I'm just meant to be staying in a place for a few years and then moving on to the next one? And I mean, do I believe in companionship? Yes, I do,
Mhm.
but I don't believe in traditional marriage for myself. For myself,
Yeah.
it's not something I want, and I also don't want children. So I think that basically gives me the freedom to build my life in a very, very different way from what society would expect me to do.
Yeah. Yeah. And I want to talk about, I think that it's appropriate for us to touch on the fact that you have this opportunity to move about, right? To go to China, to establish a life there, to then decide this isn't where I don't want to be here anymore. I'm going to go to Europe, and then eventually leading to your current life of being able to, yeah, kind of like pick and choose where you want to go. And I want to touch on like passport privilege and
A hundred
how,
percent, 100%.
yeah. And so do you hold two passports? Is that correct?
Correct, correct. Yes, my sister has three, so she has
Oh,
all
wow.
Costa Rican, Polish, American. I have two, not Costa Rican, Polish and American. My
Okay.
parents never got the Costa Rican one. Unfortunately, it's something that I'm completely entitled to since I was born in Costa Rica. My mother is Costa
Hmm.
Rican, but after 18, it's just a whole process to try to get it, which is really annoying. But yes,
Mm.
100%. But it's not just passport privilege one, yes, but it's also privilege in itself, right? Like I'm an
Hmm.
able-bodied
Hmm.
woman. I don't have any responsibilities. Like if my parents were to get sick, I don't need to take care of absolutely anybody. There's no debt in my
Hmm.
family, no nothing. There's basically nothing tying me down,
Mm.
absolutely nothing. And I know that in itself is a huge privilege combined with passport privilege, right? Like,
Yeah.
let's be real, that's just the way that it is.
Yeah. And okay, so you have Polish and US passport. You have citizenship in both of those nations then?
Well, if you have the passport, you have the
Yeah, yeah,
citizenship,
yeah.
yes.
Sure. Okay. So then, and then but then you are Costa Rican, but you don't have a passport there because it becomes more complicated once you're past the age of 18.
Correct, yeah.
And your mom never got a Costa Rican passport.
Yeah, this is, oh god. I love her, but she knows how annoyed I am at this whole thing. Like they just registered me as, because legally you're only allowed to have two passports, so obviously they chose the two strongest ones, but I mean, I know people who have four and five, you know, it's
Yeah.
illegal. It really is illegal, but people get away with it. My sister, like,
Yep.
again, three. It's definitely possible, and I wish they'd done it. I really wish they'd done it. I mean, even if I didn't use it, you know, just keep it there in the
Yeah,
drawer.
you
That's
have it.
fine. But no,
Hmm.
they didn't. So they basically registered me as, like, I always lived in Costa Rica as a foreigner, even though I'm not a foreigner. So that was really
Interesting.
strange in itself. Again, because of the two passport rule, and I
Right.
completely understand why they did it. But then once they got my sister's, why didn't they just get mine?
Yeah, that's so fascinating to me. Is your mom then also dual citizen?
No,
No. Okay.
no, no. She only has
Okay.
Costa Rican passport.
Okay. And your father is I mean, yeah, also what
Yes,
is
a dual
he's
citizen. The
dual
reason I
citizen?
have a US passport is because I inherited
Right.
from him. If one of your parents is a US citizen, you're automatically a US citizen no matter where you're born. You just have to
Right. And so,
go and
mhm,
get registered at the local embassy, and that's that.
right. And I know you don't necessarily know a lot of the legal details, but your father became a US citizen through claiming asylum status. And then I don't know if you know any other details past that of like what he had to do to become a citizen or
I
yeah.
think it took him, might have taken him, I think, anywhere like 7, 8 years
Okay.
but I mean, these were very, very different times. I know he got it
Of
sometime
course.
in the 80s. But funnily enough, so I've always been a Polish citizen as well. So like, let's turn the tables around. I've always been a Polish citizen. And my Polish passport expired. This was years ago. This
Mm.
was more than 10 years ago, and I had to renew it. And they said, you know what? You cannot renew it abroad. You have to go to Poland, spend 3 months there, and renew it as an adult, because I'd never lived in Poland as an adult. And I was like, you know
Wow.
what? That
Okay.
makes perfect sense. So I went to Poland, I stayed 3 months, and they don't want to renew it. And the reason they don't want to renew it is because they said, and I quote, I wish this was the year 2012. I didn't have a phone on me, anything to be able to record this interaction. I quote, I am not white enough to be
Mm.
Polish, nor do I look Polish enough. So they basically did not renew my passport, which was illegal in itself. And I was in Poland
Whoa.
illegally, even though I'm a legal citizen, for a year and a
Hmm.
half with no papers whatsoever because they refused to renew my passport. And I was like, okay, fine. You refuse to renew my passports, then how about you just give me, because I was a student, um, I was like, why don't you just give me a visa on my US passport then? Because I'm a student and
Hmm.
I'm,
Hmm.
eligible for it because I am a
Hmm.
student. They were like, no, we can't do that because you're a Polish citizen. So basically, I was in some sort of limbo where I wasn't being given one or the other, and that was for a year and a half. So for me to be illegally in a country that I'm a citizen of was
Hmm.
the strangest situation ever, to be honest, and one that I would not like wish to my worst enemy. To be honest, that was not pleasant at all, and I still get questioned about not last year. It happens every few years where last year I landed in Oman and I got detained because they were like, you don't look Polish. And so they took me
Whoa.
to a room, they took away my documents and my phone, because if I would have had access to my phone, I can just easily show them, well, here's
Sure.
my here's my certificate, here's my this, here's my that, here are all the documents proving that I am Polish.
Hmm.
They took everything from me and they were like, well, yeah, this passport is either stolen or fake. And
Hmm.
so it's interesting because yes, there is passport privilege, but that doesn't come along with white privilege, does it?
Yeah. That is insane to me.
I know.
That like to be told, "Oh, well, you don't look Polish enough,
Yeah.
so we're
I've
gonna withhold this."
adopted. My mom cheated on my dad. Like so many different
Wow.
allegations. Like there's no way I could possibly be Polish. That's the way I've been treated my whole life.
Wow. And that, I mean, to be detained too, to because of this accusation that, your passport is either fake or stolen. I can't imagine. I can't imagine. And I
Yeah.
feel like this is I've been told that by a lot of people in different places, like, you don't look like you're from the United States. And I'm like, what does that even mean? And I feel like this is a slippery slope to
Ugh.
go down because I've had people say, like, oh, well, don't take offense to it, like they just mean. And I'm like, no, it is not okay to say that because again,
No,
it
it's
is a dangerous slippery slope to
and the United
to
States
mhm,
is one of the most diverse countries in the world. I mean,
mhm,
people, it's just ignorance basically. But it's interesting because I've heard of people, you know, people born and raised in the UK, and they're like, okay, where are you from? And they say, okay, I'm from wherever, and they're like, no, no, where are you really from?
yeah,
Like,
oh yeah,
what does that even mean?
yeah, yeah. And even within like I have not my childhood and growing up was not anything like yours at all. But because I even have spent so much time living in other parts of the United States, I whenever I get this question, or, do the icebreakers of tell us where you're from and all of
Mm.
this stuff. And I'm like, do I tell you where I currently live? Or like, do you want to know where I was born? Or do you want to know where I like most recently lived? And like, yeah, answering that question is always
Yeah.
very hard.
It is. I'm not a fan of it. I'm not a fan of
Yeah.
it. Or in some cases, like, no, really, well, tell me your ethnicity, or that's
Yeah.
basically what they want to know, right?
Yes. Yes. And this is a whole other like conversation I've had with people too, specifically, looking at the experience in the United States and getting that question a lot in the United States and outside of the US,
Hmm.
where it's not, people don't find it to be an acceptable answer when I say, oh, I'm from Los Angeles. And asking that question of like, wait, but what is that? No, but where are you from? And I'm like,
Oh.
yo, I was actually born in Los Angeles. I don't know what you're asking. I mean, I know what you're asking,
Yeah,
but I'm
but
going to let you say.
but go ahead, say it out loud.
Yeah. Yeah. The reason why I really wanted to talk to you and have you come here and share your experience is because your story and your family's history is so multifaceted, and so it pulls in these threads from so many different parts of the world. And it is this reminder that you have shared of like, people are coming from everywhere all the time. They're constantly seeking out better opportunities economically, or just survival, or, needing to leave a situation that is no longer suitable, um, needing to find some better option.
Correct.
And this is a part of human nature. And
It
this is
is.
something
And it
that, like,
always has been. Whether or not we want
exactly.
to admit it, it always has been. And I think it's ridiculous. And I mean, we can talk a little bit more about identity, but I think it's ridiculous to think that we don't live in a globalized world, and we haven't for a long time. I
Hmm.
remember once, my my mom tells me this. I was too young. We were in Poland. I must have been maybe 3 or 4. And my grandma, my Polish grandma, she serves us potatoes, and she's like, "Do you have potatoes in Costa Rica?" And then my mom laughs, and you're laughing too right now. Potatoes are originally from the Americas, actually, and
Yeah.
they're a staple of Polish cuisine. They're a complete staple
Yeah.
of Polish cuisine. Same goes for tomatoes. I forgot where tomatoes are from. Like, our numbers
Yeah.
are Arabic, our letters are like Roman.
Yeah.
We live in such a globalized world, and people don't realize this. I mean, if you want to shut yourself down, by all means do, but then you're not gonna get to enjoy like like
Hmm.
all the seeds that we've harvested as humanity. I feel like we should rejoice in the fact that we are so diverse, and that
Yeah.
and then depending on where you're going, like it's the little thing, it's the music, it's the movies, maybe, and
Hmm.
I would hate, if you're listening to this, I would hate for you to be that person, that doesn't really have friends from anywhere else. But even if you don't, I want you to think about, the foods that you eat, and your favorite
Hmm.
foods, whether it's that, taco place or the French bakery, or I don't know, you like Vietnamese food and sushi and all these different things, like the music that you listen to, the movies that you enjoy, the artists that you like everything. We're completely
Everything.
globalized, whether we want to admit it or not. And if you don't think that way, then go live under a bridge somewhere, or go be a hermit
Hmm.
somewhere, because this is the world that we live in, and we're not going anywhere.
Yeah. And when we dig in, I mean, God, music, it's just, even when you look at music coming out of Mexico and Colombia and all of these nations, the influence from Arab nations and African nations and
Yeah.
all of this, years for years, there has been this cultural exchange, like across the entire world. And even in, I spent a lot of the majority of the last 11 years living in Hawaii and learning about, even there, just the exchange of goods and people moving about the world from the most isolated landmass in the world. There is still evidence of connections of people going to South America and
Yeah.
exchanging goods. And there was this random like conversation that I went to with an archaeologist, and he was saying there's evidence of the chickens and this exchange of chickens between
What?
Hawaii and South America because of the
What the
DNA like makeup of these freaking chickens. And you're just like, what in the world? This is insane, you know? But like years ago,
Yeah.
hundreds of years ago, and you're just like, that's a crazy thing, you know? And this is such, again, it's such a human thing to do, to move about the world,
It is.
to exchange language, culture, goods, to settle into new places, um, and be seeking out something better, hopefully, you know? I don't know. It's just a really baffling idea to me to not support that anymore and to not accept the fact that people do need to seek out better opportunities. And not only do they need to, they deserve to.
I think, and also we should not just treat people. I think there's a difference between, God, what's the word I'm looking for? Tolerance and acceptance and being
Yes.
welcoming. And I think that's a huge difference. And for me, tolerance is not a good enough word. It definitely isn't.
Yeah.
For me, tolerance, just the way, I know it has a good connotation, but for me, tolerance just means I don't agree with what's happening, but I'm going to
Mm-hmm.
tolerate it. I'll just let it pass.
Mm-hmm.
The reality is that people don't just move because they need to. Sometimes they move simply because they want to. Please, like
Yeah.
all these people retiring in Mexico and
Mm-hmm.
Costa Rica, huge communities of Americans
Mm-hmm.
and Canadians retiring. Why? Because the weather's nicer and it's cheaper. So what? Like,
Mm-hmm.
they're welcome. Because,
Mm-hmm.
and I know that's driving gentrification. That could be a whole different, season basically.
Yes.
But I mean, if people want to move, why not just let them? And if people want to, they need to move, so be it. Like, this is just part of human nature, and we shouldn't be
Yeah.
so against it. We really
Yeah.
shouldn't.
Yeah. I remember years ago having a conversation with a woman who was telling me when she first was told about borders as a child and how she just like didn't understand what this was. And it's this distinct memory for her of like, what is this line? Oh, but
Mm-hmm.
it doesn't actually exist. Why do these exist then? Like, why do I need a passport to go to this other place? Why can't that person also go there? And this is a thought too that I kind of just, borders are made up,
They
and
are.
they are established for political reasons, and it is meant to control and have power over people. And yeah, I mean, people, they're, again, like you just said, not only do people need to do these things, but they should, like, even if they just want to, they deserve to be able to move about and
They
go.
do. They do. And I mean, borders are imaginary lines that, most borders were, lines drawn by wealthy nations, basically.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Especially when they're colonizing the world. Like, it's just,
Mm-hmm.
they don't exist.
Yeah. I really appreciate you sharing this, and I appreciate how you share this on your own platform as well, and talking about your family's history with moving around the world and migrating. And yeah, the way again, I just appreciate that. And I'm glad that
Thank you.
were open to having this conversation. And me DMing you on Instagram and chatting with you, and yeah, just learning about you a little bit. It's just this, again, reminder that this is so ingrained in human nature.
It really
And
is.
yeah, so thank you for sharing. And thank you for being a part of this. And if there may be a future time that you'd like to share some more, like I said, I know with all of your travels, there are probably a lot of stories there. I can only imagine. And especially with some of the places that you've been to that I think are very misunderstood and people are
They
underinformed
are, yeah.
on too. I think that information, the more that people can have access to that kind of information and being exposed to other things, the better for the entire world. So, yes, thank you for joining me, Sibu. I really appreciate your
Thank you,
time
thank you
and
so
you
much for
sharing
having me.
everything.
Thank you.
Yes.
No, I mean, if I'm gonna have a platform, however big or small that might be, I will try in any way to. Even, I mean, it's not like I'm using my story for any to gain any kind of power or anything like that. But I think it's most
Hmm.
importantly sharing a different side of humanity that we tend to forget about. And last but not least, if I can do anything within my power to break harmful stereotypes, I will be doing it. And that's
Yeah.
a lot of what I use my social media platforms for.
Yeah. I
And my
appreciate that. I
yeah,
think,
and
yeah.
my company
Yeah,
as well. So
definitely. So, yes, thank you for joining. And where can people find you and contact you if they want to learn a little bit more about you and follow along your journeys?
thank you so much once again for having me. You can find me on Go Global with Sibu, that's SIBU, across all platforms. And if you're interested in traveling in a little bit more of an immersive way and seeing the world from a different perspective, that you can also follow us along at thehybridtours.com. Thank you once again. And if you're listening to this, identity is just a concept. You don't have to tick off any boxes. You can be whomever you want to be, okay?
Yes, I love that. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
And yes, thank you for listening. My name is Madeline Longoria Garcia. These are our other stories, and you can stream this podcast on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and YouTube. Have a great day.